Hello everyone and welcome back to Full Moon News. This is a series of my channel where I cover crazy things going on in the gaming industry. While I know that the full moon doesn't really cause lunacy, I figure it's a good theme. So, without further ado, here are my picks from this past month. Our first story truly does seem to embody various kinds of lunacy. At the very least, there's delusional thinking along with ego involved. The story starts with a writer for a game called Guild Wars 2, which is a multiplayer RPG that is considered to be one of the best around. This writer was on Twitter talking about writing characters for a game with player choice and the various challenges therein. Seems fine. But trouble started with someone replying to her with this tweet. As you can see, it's very polite. His whole tweet thread is basically just what he thought about writing, branching narratives, things of that nature. I personally found it quite interesting and thought it was pretty good feedback. It turns out, however, that Jessica Price, the Guild Wars 2 writer, was not happy with this feedback and responded to it with this. As you can see, she takes something that had absolutely nothing to do with gender and twists it so that Durar's feedback was given only because she was quote-unquote a female game dev. Even without the stupid gender issue she forced into this, it seems she totally misread his tweet. He wasn't telling her how to do her job at all. He mostly said that he slightly disagreed with what she said in her tweet thread, then illustrated how and why. You could perhaps take the thread as giving a bit of advice, but even that I don't think would be the worst thing ever. No matter how big you are, feedback's important. Durar then responds to her reaction, saying that he was disappointed they couldn't have an open discussion, also that this had absolutely nothing to do with her gender. He even apologized if she was offended. He acted much more civilly than Jessica did. That fact is further illustrated by this, where she says how the next person who tries to explain branching narrative to her, someone who has worked in the industry for a decade, is getting insta-blocked. Also, she's just indirectly called a very polite person who wanted to have an intelligent conversation about writing character, who even apologized a rando asshat. I could be taking that wrong, but that's what it seems like. How classy. Also, this might sound a bit odd for me to say, but I personally don't believe her working in writing for a decade means that she's necessarily a good writer. From what I've read, before she came to Guild Wars 2, she worked on some mobile games no one ever heard of. My point being is that time spent does not necessarily equal talent. But moving right along. And lastly, we have Price saying that how her Twitter feed belongs to her, and she doesn't owe the fans anything, nor does she have to pretend to like them. She even went on to antagonize yet another fan for being unsure about the situation, and, yet again, maybe slightly disagreeing with her. Apparently, this woman brooks no disagreement. She says this guy is entitled to her time. Well, how about her feeling entitled to just talk horribly to other people? So it basically comes down to the fact that she's being extremely rude to the fan base for no justifiable reason, then blocks said fans from talking to her. Most customers aren't going to like being treated like this, so of course the Guild Wars 2 fan base complained about it on Reddit, among other places I assume. Due to this, ArenaNet, the company in charge of Guild Wars 2, fired Jessica Price, as well as another man by the name of Peter Fries. Peter Fries' story is a lot more condensed, really. He basically defended Jessica Price a lot, saying that it was fine for her to talk to the Twitter fanbase the way she did, saying how she never asked for Durar's feedback. He even says, "These are our private social media accounts." Yeah, your private accounts that say you work for ArenaNet as a dev for Guild Wars 2. Allow me to go on a brief tangent here because I've seen this a lot and it bugs me. I've seen plenty of people on many forms of social media claiming that their Twitter feed or their YouTube channel is their personal space. No, it is absolutely not your personal space. These are public websites, and as such, your output, be it pictures, video, or text, is shown to the public. Due to that, people are free, as per the design of these websites, to make comments or reply to what you put out. Yeah, I don't agree they should threaten you or anything, but other than that, they can comment to what you put out. The only way this isn't true is if you set your account to private and you only let your friends or family see your stuff, which is totally possible. In fact, I believe you should most likely have a work Twitter and a personal Twitter, if you're big on social media and feel a need for a personal space, as it were, where you don't have to reflect your company in your tweets. Jessica Price and Peter Fries both have on their feeds that they worked for ArenaNet. As such, they are considered to be representing said company via their accounts. Therefore, the company is free to scrutinize and discipline based on how you act on social media, especially when we're talking about their product. Now, I will agree with Jessica and Peter that you don't have to pretend to like everyone just because you're representing the company. However, acting openly antagonistic is going to cause a huge problem, and there was no reason for it. Alright, rant over. Unfortunately, it seems the firing is being blamed entirely on the fanbase. Various games journalists have written articles about this, citing Reddit and the very vocal fan base on it for the firing. And as you might guess, Price herself does not feel any regret for her behavior. She got an exclusive interview with Polygon wherein she details how she was fired. Once again, a gendered lens is put on things that don't need it. She details Mike O'Brien firing her, since the person, I'm guessing, who was meant to fire her in such a situation was on vacation at the time. She said he, quote, wanted to vent his anger and had the power to command a woman to stand there while he took his feelings out on her, so he did. Ooh, scary. And mother of all ironies, she calls this unprofessional. Right, Mike being there for her firing, telling her what she did was absolutely wrong is unprofessional, but Jessica being extremely confrontational and even resorting to name-calling to her company's customers, no, that's totally fine. Oh God, what utter hypocrisy. Our last development in this story is that the same Polygon article that features Price's interview also has a large side note of sorts where Mike O'Brien tells his side of things. Firstly, he says pretty much what I said in my earlier tangent. Jessica had identified herself as an ArenaNet employee on Reddit and Twitter, and as such was representing the company. He also basically says that it's objective fact that Durar engaged with Jessica in a respectful way with a suggestion about the game, and that she, as an employee, had a duty to handle his feedback professionally. A perceived slight does not give license to attack. He also mentioned that he's proud of his company's dedication to its community and worries that this behavior will set a bad precedent on that note. And while we're speaking of precedents, Jessica at one point mentions that it sets a dangerous precedent for female game devs especially, because of course everything has to be about gender. It sets a bad precedent that if Reddit wants you fired, we'll fire you. Yeah, okay. However, Mike said this has happened on July 4th, and that they heard of it immediately. They were closed for the holiday, but decided action would need to be taken the next morning. So yeah, while it looked like the firings were due to the community's anger, some sort of action, most likely some disciplinary action, was going to happen anyway. So what do I think of all this? Well, I already mentioned that social media is not your personal space when you set it to public, and also when you're openly an employee for a certain company. She was on Twitter talking about Guild Wars 2's development. She was an employee talking about her work. It's not like she was showing some personal vacation photos or something. This was obviously related to her work. So then to say something like, "This is my personal feed," and all that is foolish and inconsistent. I don't think she had to engage with Gerard if she didn't want to. No game dev owes you their interaction unless they're specifically on the clock. However, she still was required to act in a professional manner. She also could have not replied at all. That would have been a little better. But no, she had to feel offended and think it had something to do with her being a woman, because as I said, everything's through a gendered lens with her. As far as whether or not she should have been fired for her behavior, I'm a bit less sure about that one. I do think she was going to be in some sort of trouble either way, if not being fired. Honestly, it seems to me like they could have taken a look at her social media feed after this incident and decided both this behavior and some of her past behavior. And, they looked at that and they decided that she was not a good person to have working for them. I also wonder if the fact that she seems to have no remorse or thinks she was wrong in any way at all has something to do with it. Maybe if she had apologized both to Gerard and her superiors, she could have kept her job. I don't know. The one thing I kind of disagree with is that I'm unsure if it was fully necessary to fire Peter Fries. Yeah, he was kind of being a jerk, and he was wrong, but still, I don't think he was nearly as terrible as Jessica Price. Then again, there could be other things regarding him that we know nothing about. I'm just giving my opinions on this based on what I know. And that's finally the end of this super long story. So our next story is mostly about outrage of a kind. It's not quite as complicated and crazy as the Jessica Price story, but it is fitting for the lunacy theme in its own ways. It all started when the official Twitter account of GOG, a PC gaming distribution service similar to Steam, promoted Postal 2 with this tweet. As you can imagine, many gaming journalists weren't fond of this one bit, and of course it was deemed to be a pro-Gamergate tweet. Now, I could be wrong here, but I'm thinking not everyone that dislikes game journalists and gaming journalism in general is tied to Gamergate. For example, I'm not exactly pro or anti-Gamergate, and yet I really hate most so-called journalism that I read from gaming publications nowadays. The journalism site that had a true problem with it, though, even to the point of severing business relations, was a site called VG247. Shortly after the tweet was released, VG247 posted a tweet of their own and an accompanying article saying they were severing business ties and how horrible the tweet was. Yeah, God, this article's really something. Firstly, the article says that the tweet could be interpreted as a dog whistle that panders to hate group Gamergate. I'll leave the hate group bit out of this. The truth of the matter is that the picture doesn't mention Gamergate. For those who don't know, which included me before researching this story, August 28th, 2014 is an interesting day. This was the day that a bunch of gaming journalism outlets decided to post articles which said how gamers are dead, gamers are over, a guide to ending gamers, and many others, most of which mention people like Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, etc. As you can imagine, this made many gamers, whether they had any ties to Gamergate or not, angry with the so-called journalists that published these articles. To be honest, I think most people who are very hardcore into a hobby would feel the same way. In fact, we don't even have to imagine. Look at sports fans, specifically soccer fans. They often start brawls in the stadiums during soccer matches, or right after them. Maybe sometimes before them, not totally sure, not a sports fan. Anyway, gamers don't regularly get into fistfights with each other in real life, yet we're somehow the problem. Oh, and by the way, this isn't a dig on soccer or any other sports fans. I'm just saying that if you're really big into your hobby, you're going to be passionate about it. So you can understand people getting upset to know that their hobby is being trashed. And not just trashed, but trashed by people who are supposed to report on it objectively. It feels like a betrayal of sorts if you think of it that way. So yes, that day marked a huge decline in the number of gamers that would ever trust professional games journalists again. So yes, it's already a bit crazy to link Gamergate as the only reason for the death of games journalism. After all, the tombstone says committed suicide, as in, they did it to themselves. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Gamergate. However, I think there's another bit of lunacy in this whole thing. With not only severing business ties with GOG, but also refusing to ever cover them again, VG247 is basically saying, we prefer certain distribution services more. As a professional journalist, that sort of gets in the way of your professional obligation to be as objective as humanly possible. Now, of course, they're human, as I said, and will like different distribution sites more than others. But by making such a blanket statement as this, I feel this basically tells people, you can't fully trust our coverage of other distributors because we obviously have a bias. So, yes, they're admitting bias, which is professionally foolish, and they're also philosophically crazy for painting probably thousands of people with the same broad brush. I know there were some total jerks in Gamergate. That's just the law of averages. If you have a group, at least one person in it will be toxic, and the bigger the group gets, the more true that becomes. However, I imagine that at least some people who supported Gamergate back then really did want ethics in the journalism of a hobby that they love. And that's why I feel that even though it's only one outlet, it definitely qualified as enough lunacy for the Full Moon News segment. Oh, and as a sad update, GOG apologized, and even seemed to kind of agree that Gamergate was horrible and a hate group and all that. They also took the tweet down, of course. So yeah, the second prize for lunacy in July also goes to GOG for agreeing both sides of this divide. I think they would have done much better if they just stuck to their guns, honestly. That's just my opinion, though. Well, that'll about do it for this edition of Full Moon News. I do apologize for this being so late. The internet and electricity have both been on the fritz because of the insane heat paired with the rain, because we do have monsoon season even in the desert. So yeah, if you have any feedback, feel free to leave it down below, or subscribe to the channel if you want more of this stuff, and I'll try not to be so late. And lastly, if you want to help me out, there are donation links in the description. It would help me out a whole lot. Every little bit helps. So yeah. Thanks again, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye bye.